Test, 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 test. Mike, can you talk to me really quickly?
I will talk to you really quickly.
Great. Yep. I'm going to start actually on you, introduce you, and then we'll ask a question. Okay, and we're rolling. 3, 2, 1. Michael Chernis, the attorney for Sunset Super Shop, joins us to talk a little bit more about the issue. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure to be here.
Let's start first with where exactly is the issue right now. I want to give folks some quick background when it comes to the Sunset Super Shop. They're one of at least 5 operating medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of West Hollywood. The city says they're operating illegally. What's your thoughts about this?
Well, our position is that they're operating legally. There's a long story here. It actually goes back to 2004, McCullough, and the reality is that this shop has been operating since December of 2004. It's been licensed since December of 2004, and it's been permitted since December of 2004. The current lawsuit, which I think you're referring to and why I'm here, which is trying to shut them down, it's a suit by the city of West Hollywood to declare them a nuisance. In my judgment, is basically driven to force the Lannings, who are the managers and operators of the Sunset Super Shop, out, wrongfully so. And in fact, the reality is that the Lannings are victims. The story really goes back, as I said, to 2004, where this property, 8921 Sunset Boulevard, where a dispensary has been operating, received a permit from the city authorizing this property to be used for a medical marijuana dispensary. That permit has been in effect for the last nearly 6 years, and it runs with the land, meaning that regardless of whether there's a change in ownership, that property will always be permitted for a dispensary.
Can I end up really quickly here, because the city of West Hollywood tells us that in December of 2005 they changed the way they permit these medical marijuana dispensaries to actually operate in the city of West Hollywood. No longer, they say, is it tied to property, but it's very much like a liquor license. It's sold and bought like a liquor license is, and when they did that, they only sold 4. Your shop, Sunset Super Shop, was not one of the 4. Is that incorrect?
It's somewhat incorrect. First of all, I think what you're referring to is actually in 2007, when the city changed the protocol for how to become properly licensed. Prior to that time, they had passed an ordinance requiring what's called a conditional use permit. And this is really a beautiful part of the story. If you have a conditional use permit allowing a piece of land to be used in a particular way, whether it's for your home or your business, and you're operating a business there, that permit cannot simply be extinguished by a city because somebody downtown or at the city clerk's office decides they don't want you to have that permit anymore. At a minimum, you have to have due process and an evidentiary hearing in order to take away a right that's been granted to you. And that did not happen here.
So take us back to 2007 when they changed this protocol. The city of West Hollywood at that point decided that only 4 medical marijuana dispensaries could legally operate under their new protocol, correct? And that wasn't one of your, it wasn't your client. Did they respond in any way? Were they shut down, or how did the city react?
Well, actually, the story gets even more complicated, and from my perspective, better for my clients. In 2007, McCullough, the city had passed an ordinance requiring that, first of all, they did limit the number of dispensaries to 4. My client's shop was already operating there, albeit under different management. A gentleman named Andrew Kramer at that time was running the shop. It was not until 2009 that the city decided, you know what, we don't like this whole conditional use permit thing. Why don't we just make it that you have to get a license? And I have my own suspicions as to why they changed that protocol to try to eliminate the conditional use permit process, which had been in effect and which protected my client's property to operate a dispensary. The complicating factor here, McCullough, is that in late 2007, my clients agreed to purchase the business from Mr. Kramer and thereby change ownership of the collective from which a dispensary was operating. And that's really when the story takes a downward turn from my client's perspective. And ever since then, my clients have basically been victimized by the city of West Hollywood, which has done everything in its power to shut them down, notwithstanding the fact that they were permitted there since 2004, notwithstanding the fact that they got a business license in 2008. So really, they're the victims here, McCullough.
So help me out here, because I'm trying to figure out exactly if they got if they got a business license in 2008. The business license is not necessarily a permit license to operate a medical marijuana dispensary, is it?
Actually, it is, and I'll tell you what. First of all, there's two issues here, and everybody gets a little bit confused about it. One is the permit from a land use perspective, and as I said, this property has had a permit for since December of 2004 to operate a medical marijuana dispensary. I have the permit with you. I'm happy to show it to you. Separately, there's a business license, and a business license is really the city's methodology for collecting taxes. And the city will issue a business license to a business based on its particular category of use. Here, both before and after my clients took over management of this collective, this dispensary, the business located 8921 Sunset Boulevard was licensed, had a business license to be a medical marijuana dispensary, both before and after my clients took over. In fact, when my clients took over in February of 2008, they were granted a new business license with a new business ID number, and that business ID number and license specifically says medical marijuana dispensary. So the city has known for years that my clients have been operating a medical marijuana dispensary here, and that they've been properly licensed and properly permitted to do so. And frankly, they're the victims here, and the city is way off base in trying to shut them down.
All right, a couple of questions here. Now, if the city decides to change their protocol, do you believe, as the attorney for your clients, that they are grandfathered in because they were operated under the old rules to begin with?
You know, the answer is yes. I'm not sure, frankly, about the significance of the concept of grandfathering. I mean, grandfathering may or may not be something that you're entitled to under a particular ordinance. I mean, for example, and I don't mean to be confusing, but some ordinances, and the ordinance here that was at least passed in 2007 said, you know, going forward, we're only going to have 4 dispensaries, but anybody that's been in business since, I believe it was 2005, you're effectively grandfathered. So sometimes grandfathering happens specifically under the terms of a statute. There's also times when you're effectively granted a grandfathering right based on certain constitutional protections. So here, regardless of whether the statute specifically authorized grandfathering, which it did here, I believe, there's also the issue of a constitutional right to due process and property rights that can't be taken without some kind of due process or an evidentiary hearing. So one way or another, yes, absolutely, my clients are protected under the current ordinance to operate this dispensary.
All right, here's my second question. This is in regards to the actual reason you think the city of West Hollywood wants to shut down your client. What do you think the catalyst is? Why do they want to do this?
Well, I can't get into too many specifics right now. I'll have to come back later, because right now we're contemplating whether or not we're going to assert cross claims against the city, which will basically divulge what it is my thinking is, and until then it's considered work product and privilege. But I will say that the city, you know, clearly as of 2007, and maybe even before, wanted to make sure they only had 4 dispensaries. They originally had about 7, and then even when they passed the ordinance limiting it to 4, I believe they had 6 or 7. They needed a way to get down to 4, and the circumstances here and what happened with the change of ownership between Mr. Kramer and the Lannings gave them the legal cover that I think that they needed in order to reduce it from 6 to 4. They've come up with various rationales as to why my clients don't have the right to operate the dispensary anymore, even though it's been there since 2004. And I don't mean to be cryptic, but I have my theories as to why the city has been trying to shut down my clients and making them the victims. And once we file our cross-complaint, I'll be happy to come back and discuss that with you.
Let's talk a little bit about the lawsuit that's currently you're working on right now, or fighting against the city. This is a nuisance lawsuit, right? This is not a lawsuit in regards to business license or operating procedure, but a nuisance lawsuit. What does it pertain to?
Well, it's all really wrapped up into the same theory. The city is claiming that the Sunset Super Shop is a nuisance And the basis for that, anytime really you're in violation of a city municipal code or a county code, you are theoretically conducting yourself as a nuisance. So the theory of nuisance here is that they're a nuisance because they are in violation of the West Hollywood ordinance, allowing only 4 dispensaries and requiring certain licenses and permits. They're just not recognizing the history here and the prior permitting and licenses that's been granted to my clients. So that's the theory of nuisance.
We had talked to the city of West Hollywood, their code enforcer, and he had said that in addition to obviously not operating under what they consider a license, that they have not been able to go into the shop and really to check to see if you guys are operating within code, and that's where some of these violations come from. Is that accurate?
No, that's not accurate. We are in compliance with the shop. In fact, I was brought in by the shop back last fall.
Has an official from West Hollywood ever come in to check it out?
Not to my knowledge, at least not officially. You know, we've been trying, as a, you know, they're sort of playing a very interesting dance. I mean, on the one hand, they're saying you guys aren't licensed, and you know we're not going to allow you to be licensed. On the other hand, they're saying, and you're not in compliance with the code. How do they know we're not in compliance with the code when they're not giving us the opportunity to become licensed, which would bring with it certain obligations for inspection, etc.? So I'm not aware of any time that anyone from the city has said, we'd like to come out to see whether you're in compliance for purposes of granting your application to be proper. If they do that, we'll welcome them with open arms.
All right, Michael, sounds like a long and a very drawn-out issue. Any idea when this might be resolved? Is there a timetable, at least in your head, that you think you might get some resolution?
Well, we are planning to respond to the city's complaint in the next couple of weeks. As I alluded to a moment ago, we're also considering a cross-complaint against the city, perhaps certain city officials personally, and perhaps certain third parties who shall remain nameless at the moment. That'll happen in middle of August. At that point, the issue becomes joined as it is, as it were, meaning that the cases can now proceed forward through discovery. So, you know, it could be a year before this gets resolved. You know, hopefully it'll be resolved sooner, because our goal is simply to get permission to operate the way we've been operating for years, a proper, legal medical marijuana dispensary in compliance with state health and safety law and municipal code from the city of West Hollywood. So I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later, is all I can say.
Can you from this point on, though, the shop continues to operate open? It's open and the doors will remain open?
It is open, its patients depend on it, and it will stay open as long as we can keep it open.
And what do you have to say to the allegations by other shop owners that you guys are operating illegally and irresponsibly?
Well, there's no basis.
To say lightly, by the way.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Just, I'm paraphrasing lightly, yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I will tell you that one of the things that we're exploring in our cross-complaint is the possibility of bringing certain third parties in for allegations they've made, you know, to your news service, as well as to your network, as well as to others regarding our clients and whether they're operating illegally. We're considering bringing slander and defamation charges, so I would advise them to act very carefully before they continue to make more damaging public statements. You know, obviously these other shops have a motive, I think, to, you know, sort of protect what amounts to a legal monopoly. I don't know why anyone, you know, I do a lot of work in the medical marijuana community. I represent a lot of patients. I represent a lot of collectives, and there's really not a competitive feeling going on amongst these collectives. Everybody's goal, for the most part, is to make sure patients have access to medicine. So I've never before heard such, you know, negative comments about other collectives. So, you know, I would just suggest to you and to other people out there to be very careful and to think twice about the source of these types of damaging allegations before just accepting them. Sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. Sometimes there's just somebody with an axe to grind.
All right, Michael Chernis, the attorney, once again for Sunset Super Shop. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.